Hey Jim. So I've been following with some interest your candidacy for mayor, and also the overlap between your candidacy and, I guess, the United Effort Plan Trust. So I think, in a unique position where you've got questions about the trust to answer some of them. I have been somewhat disappointed. You've put out there a lot of information and also some questions, and yet it seems like it would be a simple thing if you really want the truth and you want answers to seek for those items. And so far, to my knowledge, you haven't contacted any of the current or former trustees or any of the trust staff. And in fact, based off of what I read on your website, you haven't even been bothered to take the time to go to the trust's website and look at what's there. There is a wealth of information. You keep asking for transparency. You want answers. A good deal of what you're seeking is already out there and available, widely available. So anyway, with that in mind, allow me to do my best to give some answers. And since I know that you put right there on the first page of your website that you endorse putting the truth before the citizens, let me help out. Everything starts with an accurate analysis of what you're dealing with. And you didn't even get a paragraph in on your statement on your website before you went completely off the rails for accuracy. You state that the state of Utah dismantled a private trust. That's not true. That's wrong. The state of Utah did not touch a private trust. The state of Utah has not dismantled a private trust. In fact, the trust itself was changed from a private trust to a charitable trust, and those are legal definitions and they have meaning behind them. But that change was done under the direction of Rulon Jeffs, and in fact, I would say that you bear a fair amount of responsibility in that change. And so do I, and every other man who was in priesthood meeting in 1998, who sat there, listened to the restatement of the trust, and then voted to the affirmative that we upheld and sustained the change in the trust. We own that. We should take responsibility for that. You should. I do. That was a major change in how the trust operated, in the governing rules of the trust. And the most specific item that was changed, the thing that makes the largest difference, was the fact that it going from a private to a charitable trust removed any beneficiaries. No longer any beneficiaries. No one had standing after that. There was a beneficiary class that could ask for benefits, but had no standing to be able to sue for benefits or to lay claim to anything that the trust had. That was a significant change done in 1998, done at the direction of Rulon Jeffs. He's the one that signed that. I think you should be accurate in what you put out there. That was completely inaccurate. And I think that may have been an oversight. I don't know. But it would probably be wise to change your website to reflect accurately how and when the trust was changed. The state didn't do that. Now, a trust, particularly a charitable trust, is established in a state. That state has laws that govern it. And there is a charter written, rules that the trust must abide by, rules that the state says yes or no to that trust even being in existence. So the United Effort Plan Trust, when it was restated in the state of Utah. The state accepted that reinstatement as a charitable trust, and it had rules that it would abide by. And also, part of having a charitable trust means that the state of Utah has oversight. See, when you've got a charitable trust, if the trustees are not living in accordance with the trust document, if they are not administering in accordance would probably be a better word, the state has not only the right, but the duty to step in. And that's done through the state's Attorney General's office. That's what happened in the early 2000s. The trust was sued, and the trustees did not show up. Not only did they not show up, they went out of their way to not be served with subpoenas to come to court. Do you know what happens if you are sued and you don't show up at court, you end up with a default judgment. You cannot appeal a default judgment. And whether the case was valid or not, that's not even decided in a case where there's a default judgment. Just the mere fact that you don't show up, there's a default judgment in favor of those who sued, and that's what was coming at the trust. Default judgments because the trustees were negligent in their duties and did not show up, did not accept the subpoenas. They were missing in action. They disappeared. And that is when the state of Utah stepped in, because that was their duty. They stepped in to preserve the trust and the trust assets. If the state wouldn't have stepped in, those suits could have gone forward. The trust would have been dissolved to satisfy the default judgments of those suits. I don't know that you would have been happy with those results. I think very few people would have. And in fact, those suing weren't necessarily looking to have the trust dissolved to satisfy default judgments. They were looking for a management change. So in the early 2000s, 2005, the trust was once again restated, since the state of Utah was now in charge of it, to be religiously neutral. And that is the trust document that it runs under at this time. All of that is in court documents. It's easily verified. There is a wonderful timeline on the trust's website that has links to all the documents that establish this. That's the truth. That's accurate. It was not the state of Utah. It was not Lindbergh. It was not Wyson coming in and trying to strip a private trust. I don't know where those ideas even come from. It's just ridiculous. And so to put that out there as fact is completely incorrect, and I think it should be corrected. Okay, so let's jump into some of your questions. I will do my best with them. First one, is it true that Jeff Barlow, personal friend, business associate, LDS Bishop Frank Lindhart from Apple Valley, now owns or controls numerous UEP distributed properties in the community? No, that's not true. Let's start with a word you put in there, distributed. Jeff and Frank Lindhart have not been distributed any properties from the trust. However, they did purchase the Hilldale complex, half of it, the residential half. The other half stayed in the trust, the medical side. So they purchased that half, and they purchased that half after the trust had received other offers, had accepted an offer, and then those who had put the offer in never fulfilled even the basic requirements of paying the taxes on the property. When Jeff's offer was accepted, the Hilldale Clinic was severely tax delinquent. It was pushing the 5-year mark. So no, they were not distributed. They bought. It was at the same rate as the previous offer that had been accepted. There wasn't any special favoritism played there. And that is the only one that Jeff and Gemstone Properties have purchased from the trust. They do have other properties. They were purchased on the private market, so that had nothing to do with the trust. Okay, is it true the UEP board members are required to sign a document created by attorney Jeff Barlow to not divulge anything discussed in secret UEP board meetings? No. So there is one document required of the trustees to sign, not created by Jeff, but it's a very simple document, and this one's spelled out in the trust document. And I'll just say at this time, I don't know if you've read the trust document. It's only 26 pages long. I would highly recommend it. I think it may answer some of your questions. Anyway, back to your question. Is there, the term I think you'd be looking for is a non-disclosure, and no, there is not. There's nothing along those lines. The only one that the trustees sign is saying that they accept being a trustee and they will abide by the rules of the trust document. That's it. Now, has there ever been a non-disclosure asked of the trustees to sign? And yes, there has. I can think of one. So we had a lawsuit where the trust, among other individuals and entities, were sued, and it had to do with sexual rape allegations. And when it came time for the identity of the accuser to be made known, that was not public information. And so the trustees had to sign non-disclosures as far as who that individual was, that once it was revealed to us as trustees, we would not let that information out. That's the only one. So no, there is not some document that the trustees signed created by Jeff or anyone else swearing the trustees' secrecy. And there seems to be some confusion. Let me just address this right now. Some confusion between the difference between secrecy and keeping confidential items confidential, confidentiality. There are many areas that the trust in the application process, in the interviews, go through a lot of personal information. And that's information that really shouldn't be out there in the public domain. And the trustees are extremely cognizant of that and careful with that. And so that is why a lot of the discussion and deliberations are not open to the public, because it's private information. I know very few people who would want details of their lives, their financial history, their financial circumstances, a lot of those things out there for everyone to see. And let me address one other item here. Decisions that come out of the trust are trust decisions, not trustee decisions. And what do I mean by that? It means that there are 7 trustees currently, and for the last probably 5 years on the trust board. When those 7 vote, the majority vote is the vote of the trust. One individual trustee cannot make a decision. They must go by whatever the vote is. And it was decided quite a long time ago that when a vote has been taken, whether an individual trustee supported or disagreed with the vote, once that vote was taken, all trustees would support the vote, because it is the trust's decision. That is a trust decision. And there's a lot of wisdom behind doing that. And you may say, why? The reason why is because no one individual runs or controls the trust. It's a board. The decisions are the board's decisions, not individual decisions. And if you have different members going out and saying, well, I supported this, or I didn't, I voted for, I didn't vote for, it makes it very easy for certain individuals to go in there and to create a wedge effect. And it doesn't help anyone in the process of deliberation or having open and honest dialogue to do that. Okay. Is there evidence of self-dealing and nepotism regarding the assignment of UEP-controlled properties? Well, Jim, first of all, let's define what nepotism is. Nepotism is favoritism of relatives or friends without consideration or merit. So that's what nepotism is. Is that what you're referring to here? I'm not sure that it is. And I may need additional information to be able to actually answer that one, because no, there is not nepotism from the trust management. In fact, in the trust document, there are provisions for that very thing, as far as if there's a conflict of interest. And those are always disclosed. And if someone has a conflict of interest, say it's a very close relative, a family member, that's disclosed, and they are also not involved in the vote. Generally, remove themselves from the room. Also, if it's something extremely close, say if I put in a petition for a benefit, or if I put in a request to purchase something from the trust, of course that would be disclosed. I mean, that it's me putting that in. That's disclosed. We know who it's from. I would not be party to the discussion. I would not be party to the decision. And the same thing if my wife or someone else close, same scenario. That's right in the trust document. The trustees go by that. So no, there is not nepotism there. And I would be interested to hear from you. What is the nepotism you're referring to in the trust? The trustees aren't hiring their own kids to come and work at the trust. There are those who are relatives that work there, but are they without merit? The trust has gone through a process with every hire, accepting applications and looking at whether that individual has the qualifications to take on and fulfill the duties of that job. Can you point any position that's been filled at the trust and say that person's not qualified? The only reason they're there is they're a relative. I don't know that you can. So help me out here, Jim. I really don't know what you're referring to there. Next question. Who gets special treatment from the UEP trust? Oh, well, that's fairly simple. The ones who get special treatment are the ones who actually fill out a petition. Everything starts with a request, because there is a beneficiary class. A class of beneficiaries who can ask for a benefit from the trust. Everything has to start with a request. So if you want special treatment, you have to request. You have to send in a request. Generally on housing, that's a request for benefit. Until recently, some of those were only occupancy agreements. The trust was not deeding property out of the trust. But regardless, everything starts with a petition. And the trust can only be as accurate as your information is. For 6 years, and especially the last 2 years that I was there, constantly asking those who put in a petition, be thorough, be as complete as possible. The trustees make their decisions with the best information they have available. The better the information that you've sent in, the better your chances of success in your petition. Also, every petition is weighed against the 9 factors in the trust document that govern how someone in the class of beneficiaries, as far as the wants, the needs, where they're at, what they've put into the trust, all of those items are considered. So you've got to first ask, and then also not just asking only doesn't get you there, but you also have to fit the criteria of one or more of those 9 factors. So who gets special treatment? Those who put in get special treatment. They are considered. And let me just say right here, I know that there's another question further down, but just because you've put in a request doesn't mean that you shall receive. Oh, that seems rather unfair, doesn't it? No, the trust can only give benefits that it has available. If you put in a request for something that 40 other people did, there's going to be one person that will probably end up with that request and 39 others who are denied. It doesn't mean that the one person is necessarily more special. All of them were considered. But the trustees look at every factor and try to make a decision that makes the most sense for the beneficiary class as a whole and also the individual petitioner. Okay. So who gets turned away without any apparent consideration, even though they've donated materials and labor to build up the homes and properties here over many years? Many people. And unfortunately, it's going to get worse. And why is that? Why would the trust turn away? Well, the trust will not turn away a petition, but the trust can only grant what it has available. The size of the trust is rapidly shrinking. What's available to even give out as a benefit is greatly reduced now. And so you have to also look at the timeline. Those who petitioned 6 years ago had a lot higher chance of receiving something from the trust than those who petition today. Why? Well, 6 years ago, there was a lot more assets and very few people actually interested in receiving something from the trust. It's the exact opposite now. Far less asset available to even distribute, far more interest. So, even though someone spent their entire life building up the community, if there is nothing to give, yeah, you could say they're turned away, in that they don't receive the minute they ask, because there is nothing to give. Does that make sense? And it's not that the trustees have something out for these individuals. It's that there isn't any benefit there available at that time. Now, one thing that the trust and the trustees have been very, very focused on is trying to create not only a pathway that the property can go from the trust into private hands, and keep in mind that this trust was never a bank, it was never a credit union. What you put in does not come back to you with interest. So keep that in mind. The trustees knew that there's going to be many, many people who do not receive much back. Those who come late, who apply late, who ask late, are probably not going to get much. And so there was also a focus on something that is available to everyone within the community. And that is why there's been special efforts made on parks, on the arts and education, on a trail system throughout the community, things that are available and open to everyone. Because while we can't give a house to every single person that's worked in or built up the community, we can create a community that's available and accessible to all. And that's about the best we can do with what we have. Okay, so next question. Has the UEP Trust taken homes from families that built them and then transferred them to 501c3 charities of their choice? No. And I think in this one, I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess what you're referring to on that one. And before I get to that, let me just say, there have been evictions. There have been many evictions. And for the 6 years I was there, over and over in public meeting, I would get up and say, you know what? I would be just tickled if we didn't have to do another eviction. But why were there evictions? Well, there are 3 basic criteria to live on trust property and in a trust house. Number 1, you had to pay the taxes. Everyone has to pay taxes. As much as we don't like taxes, it just seems to be one of those things that we have, and you could argue a part of a civilized society has taxes. We all have to pay them, or the big bad government comes in and takes the property away. That's how it works. So taxes have to be paid. Second, there has to be an agreement between those living on the trust land and the trust, an occupancy agreement. And there are provisions about what is allowed and is not allowed in the occupancy agreement. And third, there was a fee, $100 a month to live on trust property. Those 3 items, that was it. If for some reason someone was not abiding by one of those 3, yes, the potential was there for an eviction. I would say that the vast majority of evictions were houses that ended between 4 and 5 years tax delinquent. There were a couple that the evictions happened because they were not abiding by the terms of the agreement that they signed with the trust. So now back to this one, houses taken and put into 501c3s. No. And I believe in this one you're referring to the Parley Barlow house, the former Truman Barlow house. That was covered extensively in a public UEP meeting of about this time last year. You can go watch that. It's got all the information. But bottom line, they were behind on their taxes. They had not paid them up, in spite of what they said. There's documentation to back me up on that. And so if you don't pay taxes, the chances are you're not going to be able to stay in that property. So no, the house was not stolen from them. It was not taken. And in fact, it was not put into a 501c3. Next question. Doesn't conflicts of interest seem rampant when we look at the interaction between the UEP Trust and those who control Hilldale City? No. I think you're going to have to help me out here, Jim. In the beginning of your website, you say all roads lead from the trust to Hilldale City or vice versa. I honestly have no idea what you're talking about. But since that's your belief and you're running for mayor to do something about it, obviously there are areas and items that you're upset with that the trust and the city have done. So what I would like, so that we can further this conversation, is I need from you the top 3 decisions that the city has made. Top 3. So you only need to come up with 3 that you disagree with, and tell me, what is it that the trust did to influence that decision? And also, how did the trust, trustees, trust management, or trust employees benefit? So only 3, just come up with 3, and then we'll further this conversation, because honestly, I have no idea what you're talking about. Next one. Isn't it time we had a complete audit of the UEP Trust and all employees and who decides what their pay is and to whom? Sure. But have you taken the time to even look at the information that's out there? On the trust website, every year, annual report. Every time something left the trust, there's been a report of what has gone out. Any housing that comes up for consideration. This is housing that is not already being lived in by someone who's going to petition for it, but houses that are available. Those are available for everyone to see what is available. All of that's there. As far as who gets paid what, look in the annual report. It's got a wealth of information there. Who decides the pay? The trustees set parameters, and the director of the trust is the one that manages that. So it's parameters, given a budget, and then reports back. It's pretty simple. It's like just about any other business in that regard. I don't know why that is something so special and near and dear to you, but there you go. If you want to pursue that further, if there's concerns that there is criminal activity or wrongdoing or anything like that, that can be looked into. First, come to the public meetings and express your concerns. I don't remember in the 6 years I was there, I honestly don't remember seeing you at many of the public meetings, and I don't remember you asking any questions. So if this has been a big concern, where have you been? There is a lot of this that's been answered over the years in the public meetings. We've had the public come, ask questions. The trustees would answer those. Show up and ask. There's a forum already available for that. Have you taken advantage of it? And also, until 2019, the trust was under court oversight. It was a probate case. Every single thing the trust did had to be reviewed by a judge and then get that judge's stamp of approval. That is far more detailed, far more onerous reporting than any audit would ever provide. So until 2019, that is what the trust operated under. And in 2019, Judge McKelvey said that the trust and the trustees had earned his confidence of complete control of the trust, and that he didn't need to babysit or keep that probate case open. He ended it. I was there. So I don't know what to tell you there, Jim. If you've got evidence of wrongdoing, take it to the Utah AG. They're the ones that have oversight. They can open an investigation. They can go through anything in the books. That's their right. That's their purview. So that would be the next avenue if you can't find an answer to a question you've got as far as any specifics related to the trust. Next question. How much nepotism should be tolerated? So this goes back, and I'm still not sure if you understand what nepotism means. Because to say how much should be tolerated, first you've got to establish that it is even existing, okay? So that's your question, how much? Total transparency is needed now. You know, when someone hasn't even taken advantage of what's out there and what's available for the information, it makes it kind of hard to swallow the idea that they want even more. Where have you been, Jim? I haven't heard from you. Neither has anyone else at the trust. You really want answers? Why didn't you come ask? We're open. We're ready. We're accepting. Come and ask the questions. Okay, next one. Does anyone know how many LLC corporations have been created by Jeff Barlow's staff of attorneys and assistants at the UEP office? Oh, yeah. Actually, there haven't been any created by Jeff, although there have been several created at the direction of the trust, and Jeff's been instrumental, since he's the executive director, in pushing those through. And really, if you'd been paying any attention, I think anyone who's been paying attention to what the trust has been doing over the last couple of years, this was broadcast in almost every single public meeting, what the trust was building, what they were doing, what the 501c3s were. And the 501c3s, for anyone who doesn't know, a 501c3 is a tax-exempt status entity. The trust itself is not tax-exempt. There are areas of the trust that really should be tax-exempt if they're used for public good, fall into a very narrow category. And so, yeah, there have been several 501c3s created by the trust, and these will be managed by community boards. This was all fully disclosed, and I'll give those to you right now. There's a Short Creek Outdoors. So the trust, right after the trustees were established, then it was it was decided that part of growing up in the creek, something that we all enjoyed, something we all loved, was being able to walk up and down the sandy wash that runs through the center of town, right? The creek, Short Creek. And so the trust felt that it was vital to preserve that as open access to everyone, and took great pains to make sure that those areas were set aside. So that's going to have a trail system that runs up and down the banks of the Short Creek. It's going to be left open for public access to everyone. But there needs to be an entity that holds this. Since this is going to be for the public, there needs to be an entity that's tax exempt that holds and manages that, especially where the trust is trying to wind down and ultimately work its way out of business, be gone, no longer exist. So there was one called Short Creek Outdoors. It holds anything that has to do with the outdoors, trail systems, parks, those kind of things. Okay, Short Creek Health and Recreation. This is the old Spud Pit, is the main one that's going into that. It's being transformed into a rec center. That's something this community vitally needs. And it's been wonderful to see the resources, say, being put into the school system and some of those entities, but those are not completely open to just the public to be able to go and use. This will be public, it'll be open for all of the community and give our young people and adults a place for recreation. I think that's vital, that's critical, but to have an entity that can hold it, maintain it, and keep it going long term, yeah, you've got to have a 501c3 to put that asset into and manage it going forward. Okay, so Short Creek Community Center. The main one in there, the community center, this is the former LSJ meeting house. It is going to be available for the community. There needs to be some kind of an entity that holds that. So you've got the Short Creek Community Center. Now, this one is not a 501c3, but it is the Partnership for Housing Assistance. That is a regular LLC that holds properties that the trust is using for rentals. These are not properties that Shirley owns, although there was a program, and I believe it's probably still ongoing, where cherished families could apply for and receive a rental unit to help those who needed financial assistance. And it was a way to receive money from the state in assisting, I'm not even sure the best way to put this, but assist a certain demographic that needed assistance in their housing, that needed help. And so the state was willing to put in some money. The trust made housing available, and it was a subsidized situation in the hopes that over time they got self-sufficient and they could either continue to rent on their own or move on. Also, these rentals, the trust is a benefit. There are some in the beneficiary class who are completely who have put their life and hold their soul into building the community, and yet at their age and their needs, a house really doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to have somewhere that's fixed up, that's nice, that they can stay, that they can live. And so as a benefit for that portion of the beneficiary class, there is rental units that are subsidized by the trust. They're owned by the trust, they're subsidized by the trust, the amount of rent that's being paid by these individuals, and that subsidy is the benefit that's given to these individuals. So that's why that was created. And the other reason why that was created is we had quite a few very, very large houses that there was few individuals who really wanted to take one on as far as a family use. And so the trust first started a program of letting those go out of the trust if they were converted into multi-use family units. The program was semi-successful in making that happen. And so ultimately the trustees decided, you know what, let's just pull that back and have the trust itself do these apartments. And so that's why more of those apartments have gone in there. There aren't that many houses or apartments in that system right now, but that's the reason that was set up. So there you go. Those are the four, and then there's also the irrigation district, which holds the water rights and irrigation distribution system in the Twin Towns. And that is not a 501c3, that's a quasi-municipality, and in fact it's got open meetings. And I would welcome anyone who wants to come to those to come and be heard, to listen to what we're trying to do and the direction that is being taken. Okay, let's see, I hope I'm not missing any of these here. Who has personal knowledge of the transaction where Jeff and friends acquired Skunk Canyon acreage from the trust through an LLC and resold it to another party? Nobody. because that never happened. And I'm being nitpicky here, I really am. But Jeff Barlow did purchase Skunk Canyon. He purchased that before he was an employee, before he worked for the trust. It was purchased from Bruce Wyson. And it was not purchased through an LLC, it was purchased in his personal name. This is when a lot of the larger tracts of land were being sold, either private deals with Wyson or at auction that Wyson was involved in. And the reason these big pieces of land were even being sold was the tremendous legal costs that the trust had incurred up to that point. It was severe. And at one point, the state of Utah had loaned money to the trust and had called the loan due. And so Wyson was busy selling, auctioning, whatever he could do to pay these things back. Jeff had put in an offer on that. It was at the same rate that other areas had been sold for. Wyson ultimately accepted that offer. And I'll just say one more thing about that. Even after Jeff purchased Skunk Canyon, it included a fair chunk of the Short Creek Wash. And when the trustees came in and got looking at that, realizing that we wanted to maintain that open for everyone, asked if we could purchase back that portion of the Short Creek Wash out of that transaction, which Jeff agreed to and sold back at the same rate that he had bought it for. So he didn't benefit at all from the trust. He sold it back at the same rate and allowed the trust to maintain that access of the Short Creek Wash all the way up through that area. So there you go. That Skunk Canyon, Jeff ultimately sold it later after he moved to town and purchased the house that he now owns. Decided that it was more than he wanted to take on to try to figure out how to get utilities and everything else up into Skunk Canyon to even build up there. And so he sold that property. And I think it's gone through at least 2 other individuals since then. Now, whether or not they put it into LLCs, how they arranged it, I don't know. I haven't kept up on that. It's private market. It's really none of my business. Okay. So if these board members have not violated their fiduciary responsibility and their sacred oaths to sustain and uphold the United States Constitution, then it seems they would welcome a complete audit of their books. Have for years. And you know what? The last time we went up and checked in with the Utah AG, they were extremely pleased with what they saw. So no, there is not anything there that I don't sleep well at night over. I'm quite comfortable with the 6 years I was there. I haven't been a trustee for, about 10 months now. But I feel that in the time that I was there, the trustees did a very good job of following the trust document and living in accordance with it. And there is nothing that I'm embarrassed about during that time. Okay, so let me see if I've got everything correct here. I believe I've got your questions, and you've got a conclusion, which is there's been very little input by the beneficiaries of the trust regarding the trustees' secret actions. So I need to make a correction there. There are no beneficiaries. There are none. Jim, 1998, priesthood meeting. You raised your hand. You voted to affirm that there would no longer be beneficiaries. Please keep that in mind. It's important. We lost that ability to be beneficiaries in 1998. That's what we did. You, me, and everyone else who was there. So no longer a beneficiary. We don't have standing. We can be part of a beneficiary class. That's it. Me, you, all of us. We're part of a class. We can ask. But that's about the extent of it as far as individuals. Okay? It is apparent that the 2 primary people controlling the UEP and its board were instrumental in choosing individuals to fill vacancy on the board of trustees. Now that's just fascinating. So myself and Don Timpson just retired from the board December of last year. Been there since the board was reinstated in 2015, 6-year term. During that time, there have been, I believe, 7 more trustees brought on. I would say I've got a pretty good idea of how that process works in selecting new trustees. And it's not 2 individuals who select the new trustees. It is a trustee board that selects those trustees. I'm going to assume, and assumptions get people in trouble, but I'm going to assume that those 2 individuals you're referring to are Jeff and Jethro Barlow. They were not involved in that process. That was the trustees that made the selections of the new trustees. So completely wrong there. And so it's a false premise, and your next statement is completely incorrect. It's based on a false premise that this gives these same men the ability to control most decisions handed down by them. No, they don't control the trustees. For the first 4 years of my tenure on the trust board, I was vice chair. The last 2 years, I was the president of the trust. During that time, the meetings that we had, the agenda, that was set by the board president. So the last 2 years, that would have been me. That was not Jeff setting the agenda. That was me. I would go in, I would go over the information that we had. We would look at what needed to be addressed, what needed to be handled by the trustees, and that's how the agenda was created. And you know, I heard many times individuals who would come and say, hey, Jeff's withholding information from you. I'd say, okay, give me some specifics. I want to hear the specifics of what's being withheld. And so sometimes the individuals come back and say, well, you weren't made aware of this or this or this. And every single time, I was aware and the trustees had been made aware of that information. Just because the trustees didn't act on it in the way someone wanted doesn't mean we weren't aware of the information. So no, the trust board is a very independent board, knows how to operate and operates quite well without being told what to do, because they aren't told what to do. That's just ridiculous. Okay. Our recourse. Judge Lindbergh told us the main means of control we, as the beneficiaries, already went over that, of the trust have, is to file a lawsuit against the board members not honorably fulfilling their fiduciary responsibility as promised. I can say with complete confidence Lindbergh never said that. And why can I be so confident in that? Lindbergh understood the nature of the trust. It's a charitable trust. It's not a private trust. We've gone over that. Charitable trust does not have beneficiaries. There is not an individual that has any standing to sue. There's not a court in the land that would take a suit filed by an individual. The only entity that has standing is the Utah AG. So if there is evidence of wrongdoing, take it to the AG. Let them investigate. Let them follow that through. But let me say this. If you take what isn't evidence to them, they're not going to investigate just rumors. They're not going to investigate hearsay. And you have to be careful, because you can be in trouble for false reporting. So please make sure that anything that you want to go report, you're accurate in. It makes a difference. It really does. And let me just go back to what I said at the first. There is a wealth of information out there. There are forums available for this information. If you really want to know, come and ask. It's there. It's available. You just have to put forth the effort. So that's, I think, the questions. I did my best to answer them. And I've just got a couple of comments here at the end. So on your candidacy, and you're running for mayor, I'm having a hard time really understanding, is this the mayoral position of Hilldale that you're really running for? The other thing that's been fascinating to me, just fascinating, is your number one supporter and booster seems to be Willie Jessup. Why? I don't know. But I cannot think of any single individual, short of maybe Warren Jeffs, who has cost the trust, who has squandered more of the trust assets than Willie. And in the 6 years that I was at the trust, the confidence, the trust that I extended to him, he squandered completely. Willie is an individual, by the time I left the trust, that I had no confidence in. And so, I don't know, Jim, do you find him a credible source of information? I don't know. Do you? Something to think about there. One other thing. It seems like the majority of what you've put on your website and the questions you've asked are the same nonsense that Willie's been putting out there for years. And so I've just got to ask, Jim, are you running for mayor of Hilldale, or is Willie running you?